Good evening, students. Welcome to the class on communism and post-communism. So we're going to focus on two countries especially, and a little bit of third country as well in the Western Hemisphere, but mainly China and Russia. And before I dive into their history of communism and post-communism, I want to talk about what communism is. What do you think is communism? You have studied ideologies and political ideology class, remember? And you learned about fascism, liberalism, anarchism. What do you think is communism? Yeah. Communism is trying to achieve equality in society. By doing what? By eliminating market forces and private property. So communism is an idea, just like every other ideas you have studied. Who came up with it? That's right, Karl Marx, K-A-R-L, Karl Marx, M-A-R, Marxism, people say, right? Now there are modern scholars who are neo-Marxist, N-E-O, neo-Marxist, many of them are there. Even CUNY has a professor who is a neo-Marxist, Hunter College, if I'm not wrong. And so now let's talk about Marx a little bit, because I don't want to go into that history of his biography. He is a Jewish scholar in German origin, and he wrote a lot on Das Kapital, his books, Communist Manifesto, which are like his famous works. And what is this idea, this why is he mad at capitalist, you would ask? So if I have to give a simple example, this is how he explains, right? In communism, say, forget about communism, a chair is produced for $100, okay? And actually the wood costs about only $50, say. And if the chair is sold for $100, how much is the profit? That's a $50, right? And the profit is to be kept by the capitalist who invested in it, right? Whereas in the communists, they would say, wait a minute, the wood is actually only $50. It became a chair because of the labor of a laborer. And he added the extra value of another $50. So even though, say, if it's sold in Amazon and Jeff Bezos makes extra $50, they think the capitalist took the money away from the laborer. Are you following? Because the value is added not because of the capitalist, because of the laborer. But of course, if you're in a capitalistic society, you would say, wait a minute, didn't he invest money in buying that wood? And didn't he pay a proper wage or salary for the chairmaker? And on top of that, he advertises and makes profit. So shouldn't that money belong to him? But Marx doesn't see that way. And Marx has a peculiar way of seeing even history of mankind. So there are different phases of history, different stages for Karl Marx. So the first stage is feudalism, okay? If you go like 500, 600 years ago, even bubonic plague time, feudalism is the most practiced in Europe, right? The feudalism was subsided by bubonic plague. Well, quick I would say, because of the labor shortage. Now, Marx talks about feudalism led to capitalistic society. Why? Because feudalism creates bourgeoisie, the upper middle class, people of money. And those moneyed people want access to power, okay? And they created a capitalistic society which will have a democracy. Access to power means they want to have access to democracy, right? Not authoritarian, few people ruling, the majority having access. Majority means not majority of the country, the majority of the moneyed people. Creates a capitalistic society. So from feudalism, it becomes a capitalistic democracy because of the bourgeoisie. Now, the bourgeoisie oppresses the proletariat, spelled as Proletariat. Who is this proletariat? Working class. And this working class then does a revolution. Just like the bourgeoisie did the revolution from feudalism to capitalistic society, the proletariat does a revolution and takes it to a different time in history, which is a dictatorship of proletariat. Dictatorship of proletariat. Now, after they reach the dictatorship of proletariat, Marx says the state will wither away, the powers of the state will wither away, and then eventual end is a communistic utopia. Well, it's theory. In practicality, I mean, the closest I have seen with amicably in people working in a communistic utopia is kibbutzim, which is in Israel. When it's formed, people all worked, labored in orange fields and others, and shared everything. Everything was kept in common because many of these immigrants to Israel came from ex-Soviet Union. And so, not ex-Soviet Union at the time, that was Soviet Union still. I'm talking from now, ex-Soviet Union. At the time, Soviet Union. So Soviet Union Jews, so they had this idea of communistic ideas. So where did this start? Karl Marx wrote it, and he died 19th century. It all started in 20th century, in the midst of World War I. When World War I was going on, there were czars were ruling Russia, czars. From the 17th century onwards, czars for 300, 400 years. And then suddenly, there was this man named Lenin, very charismatic and eloquent speaker. He was living as an exile because if he's in the country, he's a rebel, he will be caught and killed. And the Germans who were fighting against the Russians sent him on a train. Okay? And along with his comrades, Lenin went to Russia and overthrew the most powerful czar. Yes, with just few of his comrades, took over power. And he called it, it's a coup d'etat, but he called it a revolution, October Revolution. And then what? Created a communistic society. He called the Western states as imperialism. He even wrote a book called Imperialism. Okay? The Western societies dominate and take plunder wealth. And capitalism has its own seeds of decay. He believed that the communistic idea will spread around the world. It did. Not to around the world. It did spread to some countries. We'll talk about that. Okay? And so Lenin didn't stay in power for long. He got sick and he died in a few years. There was a man he warned about. He didn't think he was sane enough to lead such a powerful landmass of people. Stalin. Okay? You could talk about Stalin. You could teach an entire course on Stalin. That's much in detail. Biographers have spent ink, as they say, spent ink on him. And he ruled with the iron fist. We talked already in earlier classes how he has killed millions, right? 8 million purged in the military. We talked about the purges. Like 90% of officers were killed, generals, 80% of officers. It's like 8,000 shot in a night. Remember those things? He purged. And that is communistic utopia? No, far from it. It's an authoritarian nightmare. That's what it was. But Stalin in the 1950s died. And he had gulags. The gulag was there even before communists took over power. It was there even during Tsar's time, but not as severe as exile. You will be dead, basically, in Stalin's time. and Stalin himself was in Gulag in the in the Tsar's time, and he escaped from it in the cold time. I don't want to go into the details, but it's amazing story how he escaped. These deaths he caused was completely castigated by Khrushchev, a leader who governed during the time when Kennedy was the president of the United States. John F. Kennedy and Khrushchev met in Berlin, and Khrushchev thought Kennedy is a pushover. Khrushchev took over power, and it was amazing that he was castigating Stalin for the crimes he has done. But Khrushchev at the same time wanted his country's power. He told, we will bury you. History is on our side. So even when JFK, which he's an intellectual, he loves reading books, when he talks to him about the wonderful things capitalistic society could do, he would say, no, we have done far better, and things like that. One time I'll give you an anecdote. Anecdotes are stories which will stick in mind, right? When Khrushchev was coming here to the US with his wife to visit in the ship, and the ship was getting close, Soviet Union guy in the ship tried to jump into the water, swim so that he could reach New York, close to the harbor, and become an immigrant here. And Khrushchev will say, go, good luck, go eat how expensive their steaks and other things are, he would say. So he didn't think like it's a great society, even though he sees people jumping the ship to go and join the capitalistic society. Okay? But Khrushchev has a historical moment. Khrushchev saw that the US have missiles, nuclear missiles in Turkey, looking at them. So Khrushchev put some nuclear missiles very close to the US. Cuba. Why did I brought that story? Because Cuba is the communistic country under Fidel Castro, who through coup d'etat took power and stood against the American imperialist. America tried to overthrow him many times, but failed. Many of the CIA attempts have failed. Bay of Pigs, you probably heard of it. I don't want to go into the details because this class lecture will be long. It's a failure during Kennedy administration time. It was planned during Eisenhower time. Now, Khrushchev put those weapons there, but did not give permission for Fidel Castro to launch it. So later, that alone, you could teach a whole class on the discussion which went between them and how JFK de-escalated that conflict, which could have killed hundreds of millions of people at the least on both sides because of the exchange of nuclear weapons. Communism and a capitalistic society. That was this close. History came close to annihilating that many millions of people. Nuclear tipped missiles looking at US cities in Cuba, not far. Okay. But because of Kennedy's diplomacy and de-escalation, the nuclear missiles were removed, and in exchange, US removed the nuclear missiles in Turkey. Now, after Khrushchev, many of them came to power, but they lived short. When Ronald Reagan was in office, he would say, how am I going to make peace with these people when each of the Soviet leaders die on me? They were just dying because they're old by the time they reach the power. But finally, for Ronald Reagan's luck, a man named Gorbachev came to power. Gorbachev. He had his own grandfather taken away in the night raids during Stalin. Stalin in the purge has sent his grandfather to Gulag. When he came back alive, luckily, grandfather, he never talked about it, what happened there. Okay, Nikita Khrushchev studied hard and climbed up the party ladder to become the general secretary of the Soviet Union's Communistic Party. So the leader of the Second World countries, the Soviet bloc, the Warsaw Pact, all those countries which come in the bloc. He introduced two policies which you need to remember. Okay, and if you want to read a full book on how fascinating the collapse of the Soviet Union at the time, there's a Pulitzer Prize winning book called Lenin's Tomb. Lenin's Tomb. Check it out. But here, just two policies you need to know. Glasnost. Yes, it's a Russian word. I'm going to spell it to you in English. Glasnost. Glasnost. And perestroika. Perestroika is spelled Perestroika. Perestroika. Now, glasnost means, you could easily remember like glass, transparency. Perestroika means structural adjustments. So he created this transparency and structural adjustments in the regime, which is an authoritarian regime, and relaxed, this liberalizing the society, which, according to Putin later, resulted in the collapse of the Soviet Union. But there's books written on how Ronald Reagan was aiding in winning the Cold War for the West by the help of CIA and helping operations inside Soviet Union. Okay? But technically, people would say Gorbachev tried to save his country, but went on to save the world. He got a Nobel Peace Prize. Gorbachev is still around. And the collapse of the communism, the collapse of the Soviet Union, right? 1989 was the starting moment, the beginning of the end, as Churchill would say. The beginning of the end. Churchill wasn't there alive at the time, but the quote is from World War II time he used. 1989, Berlin Wall fell, and when the wall came down, that was the first nail in the coffin. This was the wall between East Germany and West Germany built. Why is there was a wall? Germany divided together, going back all the way to World War II, when the Russians defeated the Nazis army and pushed back towards the west, all the way from east. Then Americans entered through France and pushed the Nazis towards the east. They met in Berlin and they divided the country into East and West Berlin. And there were in East Berlin, the Soviets communists put a puppet government. So the East Germany was a communistic society. And the West Germany was a liberal democratic society. And you saw how stark contrast, even though it's all German people, right? In fact, the current chancellor of Germany, Angela Merkel, lived in East Germany. That's why one of the reasons she speaks Russian fluently. She went on to become a scientist as well. Okay, chemistry, PhD. And when the wall fell, well, even before the wall, people in the East will start running, especially teachers, plumbers, anyone with an occupation. They were paid higher in the West Berlin. So they will cross. They will cross because it's better life standards. So they put a barrier to say, no, you can't go. But people will go. And then they built wall. And sometimes people started even climbing the walls. Then they shot people. You got to watch Tom Hanks' movie, Bridge of Spies. And you would see, that's based on a true story, by the way. And it's a beautiful movie. They'll show the Berlin Wall and people being shot for climbing over. Now, the wall came down in 1989, but the Soviet Union collapsed. Collapse means Soviet Union had many countries under its umbrella, right? Like Belarus, Kazakhstan, all these countries came into pieces, different pieces. Russia become just a single country. Now, yeah, Russia alone now is the largest landmass in the world. Second is Canada, third is US. Now, Russia alone is a large landmass. And if we had about a dozen countries added to it, imagine the size of the landmass. They had about 1/3 was under the Soviet Union domination. Yes, there's part of it is America's here, the first world. Second world is the Soviet Union. First world, America and the Western Europe, all these allies. And there's third world countries like India and the other neutral countries. Still, they have like 1/3 of the world's population under them. And communism, an idea created by a poor, he was broke. Karl Marx, his idea created an empire which dominated the world. You see the power of ideas? Yeah. And so now this communist bloc, when they brought down the Soviet Union flag and raised the Russian flag, it was just Russia. So Soviet Union went down to extinction. And Russia's first president became Boris, Boris, Yeltsin, Yestin, Boris Yeltsin. I don't know, technically that's exactly how you pronounce the Russian name. I know the spelling and so on. And he wants to create democratic society in Russia and remove communism and create capitalism. Now here's the kicker. If you or I have been taught all our life not to steal, it's morally wrong. We live in a society that as you grow as a children, you know stealing is wrong. Suddenly, the government says, no, stealing is good, go do it. Would you do it? It's not easy, not for everyone. Even if government says it's okay. Why did I say that? Because they said capitalism is wrong. It's been preached. Owning private property is wrong for decades, for generations. And then all of a sudden, you say, oh, go and have private properties and let the markets bring development, economic development to our country. Not everybody is going to get involved. But there are people who took advantage of that changes. And these people, some of them were math professors, become billionaires. How? Through a process called rent seeking, write it down, quote unquote, rent seeking, which means taking advantage of the state's properties being sold to privatization. So I'll make it simple. If there is a mine, coal mine, say for example, everything's owned by the state in a communistic society. Suddenly they're selling it to private individuals. And I am buying the mine for $10. But the mine is worth $100. Didn't I already made $90 profit on it? Already did. And that is rent seeking. And the rent seeking behaviors created billionaires, windfall for few who were called oligarchs, Oligarchs. Rent seeking happens even in the United States and developed countries. I'm not saying it's only in post-communist, but not to this scale. Not to this scale of because these guys are crony capitalist. Cronies, like friend, CRONY, capitalist, which means they're friends of Boris Yeltsin. Boris Yeltsin is a drunkard. Okay, he loves to drink. Even when he came to the United States, he got drunk and danced on the stage. And when he was in DC, in the nighttime, fully drunk, came out trying to pull the taxi, hail a cab, go and eat a pizza in the pizza store. I'm not joking, away from his bodyguards. Russian president. Now, this guy, too much interested in alcohol, created problems. One, image for his country. Two, his health was deteriorating. And he's the president. You know, it's semi-presidential system. But when he had good things, the West hoped that he will create a full-fledgling democracy. Why do West care? Because DPT, theory of DPT, democratic peace theories, Democracies don't go to war with each other. This is an idea Kant created in his book Perpetual Peace. So the countries which, if they're authoritarian, yeah, look, I know now you're suddenly thinking, yeah, all the countries, United States going to war, from recent Afghanistan, Iraq, to with the monarch, British monarch revolution, it's or Vietnam, it is are now the threat of Ayatollah Khomeini in Iran or North Korea. It's authoritarian countries. Okay, do you think America is going to go to war with England or with China? The chances of with China is higher than with England, right? And so we wish to have Russia join in the society of democracies, and he was taking there. But the economy, the markets, created windfall for few and misery for a lot of people. Because even in the communistic societies, people could go to stores and find bread, milk, and things. Of course, they're not going to find different types of designer purses. The communistic party boss will tell, make brown purses. And that's it. If you want green purses, you're not going to have it. Only brown purses will be there. It's wastage because it's top-down orders, not based on feedback from what the customers like and entrepreneurial way to satiate the market, satiate what customer wants. Now, he is there as the leader. If there's some wrong program criticizing him, TV program, Boris will change the channel. It's not going to be like, oh, how dare. Because in Stalin's time, do you think anyone will dare to criticize him on TV? Oh, that's authoritarianism. Not only the guy criticizes will disappear, his family and distant relatives will disappear. Whereas with Boris Yeltsin, like SNL makes fun of American politicians, they make fun of it, he will just change the channel. And these guys, TV owners, were getting wealthy. And then he had a lot of prime ministers come and go. Prime minister's job, you know how it is, semi-presidential system. They look into the domestic issues, less powerful. The foreign affairs and others are dealt with the president. Putin, who was a KGB agent, I could talk about Putin for a long time, but we don't have. Maybe I'll say it in a couple of points. If you're interested further, read this book, The Last Tsar, because those were apparently his dad's words before dying. Putin's dad's father's. My son is a czar now. Last czar. Czars were the ones who were before overthrowing Lenin. Communism came. 300, 400 years ruled Russia, right? Monarchs, kind of. Absolute power they had. So Putin was a KGB agent who, when the collapse of Berlin Wall happened in East Germany, he was there as a KGB agent. He burned many of the documents because the people who are writing and other things might come and find the documents. And he was mad at Gorbachev for letting the country fall. And he worked for a mayor in Moscow and finally ended up, long story short, prime minister. And Boris asked him one day when they were sitting and having lunch or dinner, and asked him, Vladimir, would you like to be the president of Russia? He didn't immediately say yes. Just stood there, sat there, said yes. When the ceremony happened, Boris here, a big fat man, old, drunkard, walking slowly. Here comes a young, energetic man. You know, Putin's walk with one hand swinging and one hand completely steady. If it's in a classroom, I'll imitate it to you. But here, I can't do it. You won't be able to see it. And he comes in, takes over power, and Boris said, take care of Russia. Oh yeah, he's going to take care of her very well. It's not going to become a democracy. He's going to take a 180-degree turn, right? And change constitutions so he could change and stay in power for a long time. multiple times as president of Russia. He called all the oligarchs, the rich crony capitalists. He said, you could do whatever business, make money, that's fine. If you try to step into politics, watch out. He threatened it. Anyone who dared to do it, like criticize him, anything on TV, they will face the consequences. Reporters who run away even to England, he will send spies to kill them. Even with the nuclear material like polonium was used. Yeah, it was invented by Marie Curie, named after her country, Poland, polonium. It was dropped in the food, in the sushi, in England. And the guy died of nuclear poisoning. The Scotland Yard tracked and found the radioactive substance in the plane they came, the hotel, everywhere. It's only 4-5 countries can create it, has the capacity to make it. Putin has killed many people like that. When it was asked to Trump, he was do you think America is not doing those things? Right? Something like that. He's saying that America is not naive or nice. We do things. Why do you blame Putin? That's what he is intending to tell when Trump was asked. Now, Putin is in power. Capitalism is part of the society. But Russia has natural resources. Russia's oil and natural resources are the way. Remember, authoritarians, they don't need the consent of the people if they have natural resources. Saudi Arabia, it's oil, right? And then many sub-Saharan African countries, the authoritarians, natural resources. They could sell. And many Russian men, the longevity has declined. The post-communistic society, they don't even make it to 50, 55. Usually there's a research I read that happiness start increasing after 50, right? For men and women, even in monkeys after middle age. But Russian men, it said, don't get to live that long to see happier part of the lives. Isn't that interesting why we get happier after 50? That's a whole conversation, but I can't talk right now about that because I got to talk about China. Now, Putin is not stopping there with his large landmass. He wants to create further growth. He wants to bring back the Soviet era time of competition with the United States. He wants to bring back the Russia, the powerful country once it was. And there are people who support it. Not just the country, but even the authoritarian ways. Not all. I even had a neighbor who gave me a Putin's magnet she had in her refrigerator, American, but Russian born. And she had Russian passport, I think, and US passport. And she gave the Putin magnet. Point is, there are people who like him, but there's a lot of backlash and enormous amount of international pressure. He started intervening in other countries' elections. Why would he care? You might think. Oh, so that the European Union and NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, the West, doesn't encroach, come close to him. All the way, Ukraine wants to join the EU or NATO's. Whereas that's having your enemy in your backyard, he doesn't want. He annexed Crimea. Because he's saying, oh, there's Russians getting persecuted. That's like saying, which they say, some whites believe that whites are getting persecuted, Christians are getting persecuted in America. The majority getting persecuted by the minority. And that's what his argument. And he's already talking about Baltic states, which have like 4-5% Russians. He might take over that as well. And you might think, what is the international community doing? Push back. Nobody is fighting him back. Even he intimidates Germany, that Germany is the strongest nation in the Europe with the highest economy. If threatens, he will close the valve of oil flowing from Russia to Germany. He even intimidated, he's a KGB agent, right? He plays with the psychology of leaders. He studies. He knows Angela Merkel has a background of fear of dogs. Something happened to her in her childhood with a dog. Maybe it bit it, I don't know the history. He brought a dog to the meeting to scare her. Can you imagine? And so that's Putin right there. And post-communism of Russia, and they're creating supersonic missiles, which is faster than the sound. Before you hear the sound, the missile is here. Okay? Faster than the sound, Mach 4. Missiles, hypersonic missiles, which our defense system will not be able to take it out. If they are nuclear tipped, and they will hit the target before the defense system could alert and stop it. Now, if you go to another country, that's China. China was a communistic country. Not, when did it become communistic? See, there is a mainland China, the main China, right? It was fight between capitalistic forces and the communistic. Shanghai, C-H-A-N-G, space, Kai, K-A-I, space, Sheikh, S-H-E-I-K, Google. Shanghai Sheikh was a nationalist supported by the United States. They were fighting civil war before World War II started, before Japan invaded China. And then they joined together and fought against the Japanese. Until America defeated the Japanese, this Japanese slaughtered, created a genocide. There's a Nanking, rape of Nanking. There's a book, if you could read, it's about the genocide of the Chinese by the Japanese. Horrible images, the atrocities mankind can do. But when the Japan was defeated, again the civil war started. Because who should rule China now? Free China. And Mao Zedong's forces were less. He didn't even have proper ammunition and weapons like the nationalists under Shanghai Sheikh, who had support of the West. But Mao Zedong is a voracious reader. You could read a book called Mao. He's also written a book on guerrilla warfare. He used guerrilla warfare effectively. Many of the members of the village joined him and fought against Shanghai Sheikh. They would throw the books of Sun Tzu's Art of War. That's a book written 2,000 years ago, right? Chinese book, still a classic in military affairs. Throw them at them. Like, you people didn't even know your own cultural warfare book. You used this to defeat you. Shanghai Sheikh took the billions of golds and ran from the mainland of China all the way to a small island near China, mainland China. It was called Formosa at the time, and later became Taiwan. And it became a capitalistic and democratic society as it is still now, and economically powerful. That is not a communistic society, but Mao Zedong took over the mainland and created completely a communistic society. Under his rule, they even created nuclear weapons with the help of the Russians. Khrushchev even came, and one time Mao Zedong put him in an awkward place of swimming pool. Khrushchev doesn't swim. Mao felt that he had to put him there. I don't know what this psychopathy with these guys. Rather than make your whole guest comfortable, who is helping you in the first place. So the Russians pulled out their nuclear program in support of the Chinese, and the Chinese went on to do it, the remaining on themselves, with help of spies information, which went all the way from the US in different forms. I don't want to go into the details. If you're interested in reading about these things, Nuclear Express, read this book. Chinese, Mao Zedong created 2 programs, destroying millions of Chinese lives. Great leap forward. We're going to leap forward in economy better than the capitalistic West. So ask people, everyone, to manufacture iron, for example. How? They started melting pots and things in the backyard with a homemade furnace. It was just a clunk of metal sitting there, nothing. Iron production will double the production what we have now, he said. And wherever he went on to visit, he will go and train. Even when he's going to visit Stalin and he's going in his train, and people will plant the very fertile crops around the train tracks. You will look, oh yeah, China is doing great. But people are struggling, starving. Millions died in starvation. Then the Cultural Revolution, people are beaten. Even, remember this name, Deng Xiaoping. I'll spell it later. I'll spell it now. Deng, D-E-N-G, Xi space, Xi X-I-A-O space, Ping, P-I-N-G. Deng Xiaoping later will become leader after Mao Zedong died. But Mao Zedong will send him, exile him from the capital, Beijing, to go and do like a pauper farmer, poor farmer. Because in communistic society, you have to purge your bourgeoisie instincts. You have to stand there and confess about your guilt. I'm bad. Yes, everybody will be like, yeah, you're bad, you're bad. Yeah, I had this bourgeoisie instincts. I should not. I apologize. Many books. There's a good book called Man Standing Next to Mao, if you're interested in reading. Okay? And Deng Xiaoping, after Mao Zedong died, came back to power, and he did something very important for China. He noticed the Western countries are developing because of a capitalism. So he wants to try that out in China. This is a communistic society. It's a communistic party. But he wants to try a capitalism. So what he did is he doesn't want to create a complete project for the entire country. Pilot studies, as you could say. You know what a pilot study is, right? Trying it out in small areas. Even if it's in New York City, there are pilot programs. They try it out in, say, Bronx, some schools, and see if it is a successful program to be implemented for all 5 boroughs. So he did pilot programs he selected these regions called SEZ, Special Economic Zones, SEZ. These special economic zones, Guangdong and other southern provinces, he gave permission to practice capitalism. It unleashed forces of capitalism never seen before. And these regions become very wealthy. And then the country was open for capitalism. That starting 1980s, China began to grow, the dragon. In 1989, China, bourgeoisie. When people started getting wealthy, they want to have democracy. You got it. So people protested in Tiananmen Square. You go there, there's still Mao Zedong's photo. In Tiananmen Square, they protested. But guess what? Deng Xiaoping and others sent tanks rolled out against the people who protested. Students mostly crushed the rebellion. Many were killed. And continued the one-party communistic party in power. But capitalism brought more than 500 million, that's more than the population of the United States, out of poverty in China. And it grew at the rate of 9 to 10% on average per year for the 3 decades. Never in the history of mankind any country has grown like that before. You following? And now they're poised to threaten the United States because countries' wealth could be transferred into military power. And the rising power, China now, the top power, they will challenge. In the last 500 years, most of the cases, the rising power and the stable power, top power, have fought wars. This is called Thucydides' trap. There's a book written by a Harvard professor called Thucydides' Trap, whether China and the US will fight wars, possibilities, and how all those things. And Chinese president have already said, asked his military to be prepared for war at any time. And they're increasing their military spending. Are you following? Communistic and authoritarian but capitalistic model. Maybe that is the new form of success, according to some critics of capitalism and democracy. Rather than capitalism and democracy, capitalism and authoritarianism. Because even today I saw they're creating a train, 600 kilometers per hour speed trains. And still the US, which has created hundreds of years ago, subway trains, underground, and all these miracles, and now staying backward, not yet has improved. Society, others are leaping beyond us. Of course, the economy of the United States is still the number one, okay? In terms of almost, even recently in Wall Street Journal, I was reading 50% more than that of the Chinese. But now, with the COVID virus, all the Western economies are negative. Only economy which is growing is China fast, and it's growing even better than it was before the COVID. Interesting. Now I want to talk about, in ideal situation, the communistic, what Karl Marx and other scholars have written, but in reality what happened. 4 things. You could make it as a table. It's in the table in your book if you want to see. And then I want to end this lecture. And I want you to watch the documentary on China, on its growth. The current documentary PBS created, Prosperity and Power of China. So you would understand how communistic party, right? Post-communism in terms of economic model, they have changed it to capitalistic model, but politically it hasn't changed, right? And so let's talk about the 4 points. The first one is about gender roles. Gender roles, ideally, when they said, oh, women will have equality with men politically, socially, economically in a communistic society. Now let's talk about reality. Reality, women did get opportunities outside the home to go and work in the communistic society, but they still have to do the traditional roles, home roles. So what's the point? Difference between idealism, ideal condition, what they're written, but in reality. Second one, religion. Religion is the opium of the masses. It will disappear, is the ideal thing made as a point. But in reality, religion was suppressed in communistic societies. Actually, when Putin came to power, he helped bring back the religion, because with capitalism, it has to thrive, religion and capitalism. Third, sexuality. They said instead of marriages, legal, lawful lawmaking will, freedom of law making will continue. Whereas in reality, communistic societies, women were still conservative. They put them in a conservative state. Fourth one is, I talked about gender roles. Let me see what are the last one. Okay, nationalism. Nationalism, they said they forbidden nationalism because they believe under communism, the ethnic identities and national identities will disappear. And people will come together as brethren of communistic comrades. But ethnic identities didn't disappear. In fact, even Stalin, the communist, hated the Kazakhs. They are people of Kazakhstan. Do you know where they tested their nuclear weapons? In Kazakhstan. Yeah, well, they had space, but also if the radiation falls, it's falling on Kazakh people. Right? national identities and ethnic identities was fervent still there underneath. Okay, so let's stop the lecture now. It's 50 minutes and I've been talking throughout. You have to watch the long documentary as well. I'm looking forward to your answers. Good luck.